name of Dr. Augustine Oyekachi will give us a brief about Farmalats. Then a goodwill message will come from Professor Wavino H. Bami from the Dean of Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, University of Jos. But unfortunately, he will not be around, but someone will be representing him during the section. So we're going to continue with a pre-quiz. As veterinarians, we're not surprised. Quiz test is something that comes normal and natural to us. So you don't need to be scared or anything. It's just basic knowledge of the topic so that once our hub experts come in, you gain more understanding of what they're saying. Okay, so after that, we'll have our hub experts to take us on the acute and chronic manifestations of stress in dogs, the impact and the control measures. And one of them is Dr. Polycarp Muniji Tanko from the Department of Microbiology and Pathology, University of Jos. He specializes in clinical pathology, and then he gained his DVM from the University of Maiduguri, which is I think I basically grew up in University of Maiduguri, so I represent them partially. And then he had his PhD at the University of Putura, Malaysia. And then our second hub expert is Dr. Chidibere Uchendu, also from University of Jos, the Department of Pharmacology and Toxicology. And then he got his DVM from ABU Zaria, his MSc, and then his PhD from ABU Zaria. He actually specializes in clinical pharmacology. So next on the list will be our open discussions for all participants. This is where we'll have the question and answer section, and it will be taken by Dr. Kayode Femi. Then we'll go on the experts' recommendation on this topic from our hub experts. After that, we'll have a post-quiz, which is just like the continuation of our pre-quiz. So if you did not pass the pre-quiz, I'm definitely sure you are going to pass the post-quiz. Then we'll go on to the announcement and the next step, which will be taken by me towards the end. So I'm going to give a brief overview of before eco pillars. First, number one is using video conference technology to leverage scarce healthcare. 2, specially sharing best practices with colleagues. 3, case-based learning and continuous monitoring of program outcome. Then we're going to talk about one of our partners, Telka product, Telka. Telka Africa leverages on ECHO model. We collect registration, participation questions and answers, comments and poll response from our programs. Individual data and confidential. Your individual data will be kept confidential and handled by authorized personnel. The data may be used for reports, map, communication, survey, quality assurance, evaluation, research, and to inform new initiatives. This section is being recorded and we'll be sharing a PDF version of the slides after this session. So these are some of the tips for this session. Please, we advise you have your camera on, but please ensure that you are actually well dressed. The facilitator will unmute you when you need to speak. Please use the raise hand feature in Zoom when you want to speak. Kindly use the chat functions for any questions. This is interesting. We have like 75 participants right now. So I'll be calling on my co-facilitator, Dr. Augustine Oyekachi, to take us on a brief overview of Farmalats.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grace. As introduced, I am Asika Onyekachi Augustine, and I serve as the intern for Farmalat. Farmalat is an animal health social enterprise that was founded in 2019 with the primary mission of enabling easy access to affordable animal health care in underserved communities in Africa. Animal disease are the leading cause of losses to livestock farmers and pet owners, causing about 70% of total damage. Sadly, the animal health system in Africa leaves little to be desired and goes a long way to adversely affect these farmers, pet owners, who are the lifeline of our local feed system. We've been able to combine our relevance as a major animal health care in the marketplace with our mission of ensuring availability, accessibility, and affordability of these animal health products and services across the country. We partner with local animal health professionals, mainly veterinarians, who partner with local farmers and pet owners in building an inclusive system for sustainable animal health and disease prevention. We also foster peer-to-peer network where access to regular animal health products, veterinary services, and piece of training can be easily obtained. In summary, we are enabling access to quality animal health across Nigeria and soon across Africa. Our Tech Class session is a partnership between the largest privately owned animal health company in the world, that is the Boehringer Ingelheim and Ashoka, an organization that is designed to support social entrepreneurs using the Making More Health platform. With the help of MDOC, our execution partner, our Tech Class section moves knowledge rather than people by using digital technology like the video conferencing application that we are currently using. It's our utmost desire that you will find this section both useful in improving your various choosing area of specialty. Once again, I warmly welcome you to our ever-growing animal health community, where we derive absolute pleasure in helping you win. Please enjoy the section.
Thank you very much, Dr. Augustine. Moving on, we'll be having our pre-quiz. It's nothing serious or anything, and I'll advise everyone to please participate in our pre-quiz. It's not difficult, it's just basic knowledge on the topic that we're about to go into. So the quiz will be for like 5 minutes. So let's try and engage in our pre-quiz. The poll is up. It's actually anonymous. It's not difficult. They're not going to grade you. There's no particular grade. So okay, I can see some people have already started the quiz, which is actually nice. If you're just joining us right now, we are about to take a pre-quiz. I'm sure some of you are actually used to pre-quiz in our clinical conference series. So it's actually not a new thing. So four minutes more. Okay, I can see veterinarians. I'm not surprised. A lot of people actually taking the pre-quiz. 3 minutes more. If you're just joining us, you can participate and take the pre-quiz. We still have some time left. Two minutes more. One more minute, one more minute. If you're joining us, you can still take the pre-quiz. Fifty seconds more. If you're joining us, you can still take the pre-quiz. It's nothing difficult. It's an easy quiz just for you to understand what's about to be discussed in this session today. Okay, we have 30 seconds more, so you can start rounding up. You can check your answers if you want to change anyone. Ten seconds. Okay, that's our time. Thank you very much for taking our pre-quiz. So before we call on our hub experts, we'll be calling on Professor Adewale Ayodeji Adeyeye. I'm very, very sorry for murdering your name, but he will be representing the Dean of Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, University of Jos, to give us a goodwill message. So Professor Adewale, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
All right. Sorry, I'm not the dean, but I'm representing the dean, Professor Pavenu Bami, who is unavoidably absent due to another engagement. And he has asked me to extend his goodwill message on behalf of the management and staff, students of the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, University of Jos, and to particularly appreciate Farm Alert for this great opportunity. Our colleagues, Dr. Chidebere Chendu and the Deputy Dean, Dr. Polycarp Tanku, are the speakers this morning, and we're rest assured that they have adequately prepared for this session. And so we want participants to relax and feel at home and just be rest assured that they are here and they will respond to all the questions that will be raised in the course of this meeting. Again, we want to thank Femi and members of the management team of Farm Alert for this great opportunity. And we wish all participants a wonderful time. Good morning, all.
Good morning, sir. Thank you very much, sir. So next on our agenda, we'll be introducing our hub experts for today. So we'll be introducing our hub expert, Dr. Polycarp Wonyuji Tanko from the University of Jos, Department of Microbiology and Pathology, a clinical pathology specialist. And then our second hub expert by the name of Dr. Chidibere Chendu, also from the Department of Pharmacology and Toxicology, a clinical pharmacology specialist. We welcome you, sir. Welcome you, sir, for joining us. Our topic for today is the acute and chronic manifestations of stress in dogs, the impact and control measures. So the first speaker for today is Dr. Polycarp. Dr. Polycarp, are you with us today? Dr. Polycarp. While we wait for Dr. Polycarp to come on, this is Farm Alert TV. This is a clinical conference series that is hosted by Farm Alert every month. Last month, it was in collaboration with the University of Ibadan. And this time around, University of Jos is hosting us, Faculty of Veterinary Medicine. You are welcome. You are welcome. Right now, we have up to 114 participants watching from different parts of the world. I would like to introduce Dr. Polycarp. Dr. Polycarp, are you with us right now? Okay, if Dr. Tanko is not on seat, it seems like he has. Dr. Tanko, you can unmute your. Dr. Tanko, you can unmute your mic and speak with us.
Okay, very good morning. I think we are having issues with the muting, but I think it is finally successful.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chidibere. Dr. Tanko, are you with us?
Yes, I'm the one on the screen.
Okay, okay.
Sharing the same screen with my colleague, Dr. Uchendu Chidibere.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Sir, you have the floor, and thank you for joining us today at Farm Alert TV.
So you are projecting the slides, or it's from here?
Yes, the slides will come up now.
Okay.
Yes, I'll share my screen.
Okay.
Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. All right, sir. I'll allow you to have the floor.
Okay. Good morning, my distinguished colleagues, both very senior colleagues. I want to believe my teachers are also here. Good morning and welcome to the program. As you can see from the screen, we will be talking briefly on acute and chronic manifestations of stress in dogs, the impacts and control measures as veterinarians, and perhaps maybe para-veterinarians that are with us. As you can see from the screen, my name and my email address. Next slide. As we saw from the topic, stress. What does this stress really mean? As veterinarians, even our moderator, she mentioned the manifestations of stress in dogs and all that. Every day we talk about stress, but what is this stress? What is it really all about? Stress is just basically an external or internal factor that distorts or changes biologic equilibrium. This is the definition from National Research Council. And the change in this biological equilibrium will lead to physiological, behavioral, and psychological responses. Some scholars would prefer to match the behavioral with the physiological, but in either way, it is still the same. So changes in biologic equilibrium that will influence or change physiological, biological, behavioral, and psychological responses. What is referred to as stress. Next slide. So, if stress induces changes in behavioral, physiological, and psychological, can we or should we avoid stress completely? Is it possible? We will see in the course of the discussion that it is very unlikely to avoid stress entirely, completely out of our patients. Now, in trying to understand stress, we have terminologies, we have beneficial response. Stress that induces beneficial response. Stress. And we have a second category of stress, which is a neutral stress. Neutral stress is the kind of stress that does not induce neither beneficial nor detrimental responses, meaning that the response is neither beneficial nor detrimental to health of the animal. And then we have distress. Distress here is the type of stress or a form of stress that induces detrimental response or effects on the animal. In our presentation today, we will be looking at stress in the context of distress. So stress that induces detrimental response or effects. Next slide. Next slide. Introduction, we will still continue with the introduction.
The last one.
So, as we have seen from the previous slides, there are forms of stress that are beneficial and there are some that are not. So the level of stress that is expected is the hallmark of distress. If the stress is mild and for a short duration, it may be very necessary as part of development of an animal. But where the stress becomes severe and repeated exposure to the stressors will lead to detrimental responses that will affect the health of the animal. So as veterinarians, it is very critical that we understand stress triggers and the responses so that we will be able to manage them effectively. And there are instances where this stress that is originally mild and eliciting beneficial benefit that would change to chronic condition. And this is where the exposure is repeated and the animal is unable to cope by inducing beneficial responses. So that acute stress in such a condition will lead to a chronic stress. Next slide. So acute stress, some scholars also call it immediate stress response. In dogs, you know, dogs they manifest their feelings through body language. So because of that, if a dog is stressed, it is the body language that will show that the dog is really stressed. And some of the things we will see is in preparation, for example, biological preparedness. When a dog is subjected to stress, the dog positions itself in a way that it prepares against what is coming, which the dog is not seeing it as friendly. And the response, it prepares in a way that it will have to respond adequately to the stress. Because if the response is not adequate, then there will still be issues. So the activity of the sympathetic nervous system is stimulated or activated, in which case there will be elevated adrenaline and noradrenaline into circulation. This release of adrenaline and noradrenaline will influence a lot of responses that will portray that the dog is under stress. Next slide. So some of the responses will be increased blood glucose level. And the increase in blood glucose level is induced by the presence or increase in the release of glucocorticoids. The glucocorticoids will stimulate the adrenal gland to induce increased production of glucose through gluconeogenesis, and then reduces the production of insulin, so that in the end, there is more glucose in circulation to enable the animal take the required action against the stressor. So in this case, the continuous release of glucocorticoid also suppresses the immune system. It suppresses the immune system in the sense that the glucocorticoid will induce lymphopenia. The lymphopenia, of course, we know that there will be less lymphocytes in circulation. Knowing the roles that lymphocytes play in circulation in the immune system, both T lymphocyte and B lymphocyte, if their number is reduced, we know that the animal is more susceptible to other infection. For example, if there is a lymphopenia, if it is marked, then the number of B lymphocytes that will be in circulation will reduce. And as this reduces, it also corresponds to the availability of B lymphocyte that will produce antibodies. We can now see that a stressed animal will have lesser ability to produce antibodies, and it will also have lesser ability to attack other antigens using killer cells. And this is why we say that stress induces immunosuppression. So, As I said, the glucocorticoid leading to increased level of glucose in the system prepares the animal to the perceived change or danger that is on its way or that the animal has perceived. Next slide. So, how do stress manifest in dogs? As I earlier said, the emotions of dogs might
I think they have like network issues at the moment. Dr. Tanko, are you with us? I'm sure they're experiencing some network issues. Dr. Tanko, are you with us? If you are just joining us, this is another section of under clinical conference series, and topic we're actually discussing right now is the acute and chronic manifestation of stress in dogs. And before you joined us, we've gone through understanding stress triggers, knowing the stressors, one of the signs a dog actually experience is increased blood glucose. That's to be increased blood glucose, which actually causes immune suppression. And Dr. Tanko was actually telling us about understanding, or rather paying attention to our dog's emotion. That's the body language. They always show everything through their body language. Dr. Tanko, are you with us? And during this time, he also said it induces lymphopenia in the dogs. They said stress is a change in the behavior of the dog. You will notice a very severe change in the behavior of the dog. Maybe clients can meet you and tell you, oh, their dog is not at rest. It's always panting, there's salivation, dilated pupils, it's pacing back and forth. Some of them keep drinking water during that period, especially when there's like heat stress. And then they talk about the neutral stress, the distress, and there's a whole lot more to gain from this topic because this is a common condition that affects dog. And since dog is one of the most common pets, domestic pets, it needs to be tackled and discussed. One of the things I actually picked from this short section with Dr. Tanko is to understand stress triggers and then the responses. So based on either it is acute and chronic, each of them have their own response. Dr. Tanko, Are you still with us? I'm sure it has to do with a network problem because yesterday MTN was down for several hours, so I'm sure it is a network issue. If you're just joining us, this is Farm Alert TV, and we are in another section, in that clinical conference section. And we are currently discussing the acute and chronic manifestations of stress in dogs. Before the start of our program, we actually took a pre-quiz, which over 70% of the participants took. So if you're just joining us, don't worry, you did not miss out. Another quiz will be taken after the discussion. And if you have any question during the session, please note it down in the chat box, and during the discussion, it will be tackled and your questions will be answered. So before Dr. Tanko comes back, I would like to throw these questions to our fellow colleagues and senior colleagues. What do you understand when a client comes? Like, what do you understand by the word stress? Anybody can actually answer. If you want to answer, you can actually unmute your mic. What do you understand by stress? How do you manage stress in your clinic or when you're faced with a case like that, a case of stress? And then we know currently the weather is extremely hot, extremely, like the weather is extremely hot, and if we're not careful, our dogs, our poultry will be subjected to heat stress.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Grace.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir.
While we wait for the hub expert to come back, I think we can use this opportunity to answer your question and share some experiences as well.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
I'm also a clinical pathologist, at least by training, and I'm very much interested in this topic. When we say stress in dogs, do we exactly mean the kind of stress that we go through in humans? I think those are very basic things we need to clarify. Because now, how do we measure stress in dogs? It is easy for us as humans, even without going into laboratories, to exactly know when we are going through stress. But how do you know when the dog is going through stress? Body language, excessive panting, but that's not all. Now, again, another question will be, where is the boundary between exercise and over-exercising and then stresses? And what are the different hormones? That's what I want to hear from Polycarp today. What are the different hormones that we are expected to have that are positive in these different classifications? When we are exercising, when we are over-exercising, and then when there are stresses, even in humans. He has just told us that during the acute stresses in dogs, we have increased gluconeogenesis, increased glucocorticoid production, and then we have increased blood glucose, and then we have an antagonism to insulin production required activity. I need to understand what he means by that. And then immune suppression. I don't think that exactly happened in humans as well. In when there is stress as a factor in humans, also in animals, in dogs, the function of cortisol, I'm sure he's going to tell us more about that. There is increased cortisol production, which is positive, particularly for those who are sufferers of diabetes. I have had to do a lot of research works on diabetes in dogs, and I've published my work in international journals, British journals as well, on diabetes in dogs using the larger data experience I have. And I know that cortisol, which is a hormone produced during stress, is a positive factor that acts like a key that opens the cells for the utilization of the glucose that is inside the blood that was even causing the hyperglycemia. So it's positive. So I'm sure that before they round up their presentation, they need to be able to break down these different options of what the various hormones are supposed to be. There are happy hormones, which comes along with exercising. So it's not every stress, like it actually started with introduction, that is negative. But the great question will be, how do we know when a dog is stressed? The tolerance limit of a dog is not the same thing with the tolerance limit of a man. What we do when you see a dog runs, I saw a video of a dog whose owner boarded a vehicle, and out of love, the dog had to run kilometers after that vehicle without stopping. I'm not sure very many men would do that. So if that was an event that took place in a dog, it tells a lot about the tolerance limits in dogs, for which we don't exactly need to equate with the kind of stresses that we consider in humans. I'm just trying to find a way to bridge the gap here. So I think the floor should be open for people to share experiences. And if the hub expert is back, I think they should take their floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gani. I think Dr. Tanko is back with us. Dr. Tanko? Dr. Tanko, Dr. Chidibere, please unmute your mic.
Okay, I think I can hear you now.
Okay, welcome back, Dr. Tanko.
But unfortunately, we have to resort to using phone.
Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. While we were off, I listened to the beautiful contribution by our elder statesman, Dr. Enagoro. Dr. Grace, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you, our elder statesman, Dr. Enagoro, with your concerns and the elaborate explanations and your expectations.
I hope and believe that as we progress, some of those questions will be answered. Definitely, before we progress, the manifestation of stress in animals are more difficult to establish compared to that of humans, because humans will tell you some by themselves, and then there are other parameters that by through asking questions, you will be able to know that the individual is stressed, and then when you go to the laboratory. Interestingly, he told us he is a clinical pathologist. That is very beautiful. And the implication is that I also have somebody that if there are bigger questions than me, I have senior professional colleagues that will be able to do justice to that. So that makes the presentation beautiful. I was mentioning the manifestation of stress. I say because dogs are emotional, the manifestation of their stress is mostly through body language. Even though Dr. Nahoro, my very senior colleague, is objecting that that is not all. Yes, if you look at what I outlined here, it is not a completely just body language. It is not a completely body language. The body language is, they are the signs that will show that the dog is on stress, but to establish, you will need laboratory backup. Dr. Grace, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Recording in progress.
So, I was talking of dilated pupils, self-calming behaviors like nose licking. I think this is the point where our network went off. Panting and salivation, wrinkle muscle, which I said the dog will expose his teeth, ready for response based on the source of stress. You also see pin back or pricked ears, in which case the dog lowers its ears towards the back. And it is also part of the responses of dogs to stress or when they are stressed. I want to repeat that the manifestation of stress in dogs are not exactly the same with that of humans. And the priority for today is more on the animals, but that does not mean we will completely neglect humans, because it's, the physiologies are the same. And the clinical pathology and manifestation are also the same. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, we're still continuing with the manifestation, which I said largely because dogs will not tell you. It's largely based on body language, in addition to the laboratory tests that you will do to confirm the level and magnitude of stress. So you will still have tense body, you have low crunch posture, in which case the dog bends down and ready for the next response, or as it approaches the source of the stress. And there is also trembling and shaking. This, I think, most men agree with me.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think you have two devices on. I think you should mute one.
Okay, we were using the phone to join before our system. So please unmute one of the device.
Yes, just mute one of the device. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So I was talking about crunch posture, trembling, vocalization, and emptying of bladder and bowel. You will also agree with me that dogs that are under stress, particularly in the case of examination, if the environment is strange, you're not used to it, you will see that they wee or they urinate, and then sometimes they empty their bowel in the clinic flow. These are indications that the dogs are actually under stress. But do not forget, I said earlier that there are stress that are needful. It helps in development, and it also helps the animal to fight whatever environmental changes. Next slide. So we now move to chronic stress. Now, before we continue with this, I will say that there is a very thin line between chronic and acute stress. And here we are making reference to dog, the intensity and the duration of stress all matters. Usually, chronic acute stress that becomes repeated, in this case, some scholars call it episodic stress, will lead to chronic stress. So, persistent and excessive stress levels
Dr. Tanko, are you with us? I'm sorry about the breaking transmission. I'm sure it has to do with maybe network. So Dr. Tanko, Dr. Chidibere, are you with us? Are you still with us? I think you should unmute your mic if you are still talking. Dr. Tanko, we can't hear you.
Thank you, Dr. Grace. We're having issues with this muting and unmuting. I think unless you enable us, we are unable to unmute, and that is what is affecting our voice.
Okay,
so
okay.
I was talking about chronic stress. I said there is a very thin line between chronic and acute stress. And I said if the stressor or the exposure to the stressor becomes persistent and excessive, then from acute, it can translate to chronic stress, in which case the dog's sympathetic nervous system is like perpetually activated. And then it continues to release the stress hormones continually. And that is what leads to chronic stress. And as I said, this is a situation where acute stress can lead to or translate to chronic stress. And in chronic stress, there will be maladaptive behavior or health outcomes. We have done several works that which I think we will see in previous slides. So let's just move. When we get there, we will talk about them. Next slide, please. So in chronic stress, as I said, the stressor becomes either repeated or the severity increase, and then there is increased release of cortisol. I think my senior colleague will see it here today, now on this slide. the cortisol he was talking about. Of course, you cannot talk about stress without mentioning cortisol. So cortisol will be released and adrenaline. This, if they are in the system for a long period, elevated level of cortisol will lead to chronic stress, which I said will suppress the immune system by suppressing or inducing lymphopenia. And in the lymphopenia, I talked earlier about both T and B lymphocyte. By implication, if there is lymphopenia, as I earlier said, there will be lesser B lymphocytes to produce antibodies. And this will make the animal more susceptible to other infections. And then it will lead to other health conditions. In fact, there is a study that linked stress with reduced life expectancy in dogs that have tumor. So all other health conditions have linked to some health conditions, sorry, have linked to stress. Next slide. So in the chronic stress, part of what you will see or notice as a clinician is a gastroenteritis with the potential of gastric ulcer. Remember, we just talked about immunosuppression as a result of stress. Now, when the immune system is immunosuppressed, normal flora of the GIT will be distorted, and some bacteria or pathogens will multiply out of proportion, and they will be what will lead to the gastroenteritis as a result of the immunosuppression by stressors. So there will be increase or decrease in appetite in terms of chronic stress, suppress reproductive cycle. Dogs, for example, dogs that are subjected to stress, you realize that the cycle, the estrous cycles is shortened or distorted. So stress also affects reproductive cycle. And it also causes a delay in wound healing. There are researches that have linked stress with delay healing, possibly because of the influence on inflammatory processes. Next slide. Thank you. Grace, you can give me signal if my time is getting close so that I don't spend the whole time in few slides, so that I know how I can move. So we're still on the chronic stress. Chronic stress can also lead to metabolic and circulatory changes due to, it can induce elevated blood pressure. There are researches that have shown that stress in animals, not just humans. Of course, in humans it's very established. Stress in humans also, in animals also lead to elevated blood pressure. And decrease demand, you will discover that the animal is not really interested in, for example, exercise, things that the animal used to be interested earlier. Because of stress, then the animal will lose interest. And then there will be apparent loss of habituation. Habituation here is the process where a dog, for example, is exposed to a stressor for a repeated period, maybe gradually, and then it gets used to it in a manner that exposure to such stressors do no longer induce stress. That is a habituation. But here in chronic stress, there will be loss of habitation, meaning that exposure to those stressors that ordinarily will not induce any detrimental effects becomes a problem for the dog. The dog loses those conditioning to those stressors. And so exposure to normal stress that the dog is used to becomes a problem. It reacts to those stimulus, and then stereotypic behaviors. For example, repeated self-licking, chewing, and in order just to provide relief, or the needed relief. Next slide. Grace, don't forget, I say if my time is...
Yes, you have 5 more minutes in this session.
This is serious. Okay, age-related cognitive dysfunctions are also seen in terms of chronic stress, which include altered sleep and wake cycle, reduced ability to concentrate, impaired memory, impaired sensory function, increased vulnerability associated with stress. Next slide. And now we talk of the impacts. Several studies have established that there is a positive, strong correlation between lifespan and what is known as well-behaved animals. The study took into consideration, I think about one of the studies, 720 something participants who have dogs, and then eventually it was established that stressed animals have reduced life span. And then one of the impacts, now we are talking of impact, one is reduced lifespan, chronic stress to be very specific. And then dogs usually have a separation anxiety. That is one of the impacts. Separation anxiety here is the stress that is induced as a result of the owner of the pet traveling, leaving the pets behind. It's another source of stress, and it's a serious problem. It causes a lot of, or it is associated with several disorders. Research have shown that. And then urinary bladder epithelial hyperplasia. In one of studies, it was discovered that rats that were subjected to constant handling in the process of sampling were discovered to have hyperplasia of the epithelial cells of the urinary bladder. Next slide. There is immunosuppression, which I've already talked about over and over, is one of the impacts of stress. And then we have weight loss because the animal is likely going to have reduced appetite, and that will lead to loss of weight, decreased productivity. We talked about it earlier, that stress also induces reduction in reproductive performance. And then here we have death. Stress also induces death. When in the course of my postgraduate studies, one of my colleagues transported goats for a considerable hours, and then for experiments. It was very shocking that the next day all the goats died, and PM was done, and eventually, to cut the long story short, the goats died of pastorella induced stress. All the goats died. So stress is a serious problem in veterinary medicine, and we must make efforts to understand the responses to stress, and then how we can manage, and then how we can advise clients. Here in Jos, because of our caseload, which I know most veterinarians are aware, on the average of 50 to 100 cases per day in our veterinary teaching hospital. So that also translates to the number of postmortem cases we handle. I have handled several cases of dogs. One was a particular case of a pure breed of Caucasian that was transported from Port Harcourt to Jos, but it did not reach Jos alive. It died on the way, and then they brought it with police. It was a police case. The owner here was saying the dogs were sick and it was sold to him, while the seller was also saying that as far as he's concerned, the dog was healthy as at the time that they were transported. So when we did the PN, we established that it was a case of stress-induced pasteurellosis. 2 weeks later, another one came, and these dogs were 2-point-something million because they were actually imported. So it's a serious problem. We've handled several cases of stress-induced infections that usually kill the dog. So what do we do if stress kill the animals? Because if you wait that until maybe, for example, you are transporting animal, which is one of the major source of stress in animal, and unfortunately, it is inevitable. So we will see. Next slide. I'm afraid of my time. Next slide, please, Dr. Grace. So here it's just a depiction of stress and immunosuppression, and the fact that it causes a lot of problem. Here we look at the type of stress, which I said in our introduction, the intensity, the duration, and the time of stress. And then pathogen, because stress is established. I've done several experiments and established that stress increases disease susceptibility of an animal. So when an animal is stressed, the susceptibility of that animal to a lot of diseases is increased. So the species, the age of the animal, the sex. Dr. Grace.
Yes, sir.
I can't see my slides again. Just give me a few minutes. I will run up, please.
Okay, sir.
So this is another, and you can just, so here we can see that the level of stress and all that will lead to either disease or asymptomatic responses. And if it is not managed well, the animal may succumb to death, as I said, because of stress. So there's a lot here to talk about, but because of time, let's move to the next slide. You will recall that I mentioned oxidative stress. I actually worked on oxidative stress as biomarkers of stress, where we measure the level of catalase, glutathione, malondialdehyde, and all that to ascertain the level of stress. I recall that I also mentioned earlier that the level and magnitude of stress cannot be established by just the body language. You need laboratory backup to establish the magnitude of stress. So here, as I earlier said, there are a lot to talk about here. Induction of stress will lead to increased reactive oxygen species in the system. And under normal circumstances, these reactive oxygen species are breaking down by catalase to form hydrogen peroxide and water. And hydrogen peroxide is less toxic or harmful to the system compared to the reactive oxygen species. So where the animal is able to cope, the level of reactive oxygen species is breaking down to hydrogen peroxide and then to water. And then the animal does not manifest any gross pathology as a result of the stress. But where the level of stress is beyond the coping level of the animal, and what I mean here is that the level of reactive oxygen species in the system outweighs the antioxidant capacity of the system, then there will be problem of oxidative stress. And then oxidative stress, for some of us that have worked on that, you know that it causes a tissue injury, immunosuppression, aggravated disease pathology. These are things I did severally in several experiments. It will lead to eventually cell death and spreading of the damage to other cells. It has also been proven that stress is, it triggers inflammation, it causes more reactive oxygen species being generated in the system to overwhelm the antioxidant capacity. It also induces apoptosis. Next slide, Grace, so that I run out. There is a lot actually on these slides to talk about. Control measures, unrealistic. If you look at what we've said so far, you will agree with me that it is unrealistic to start thinking that one can entirely raise an animal free from stress. So that is not possible. And because it is not possible, our focus will be on how to manage, how to reduce, and how to mitigate the detrimental effects of stress, so that the dog will, or our other animals will be able to be coached in the way they respond to stress, and then we reduce the extent. Now, what are the other things we need to do? Number one is to identify the source of stressor, which could be a disease. Disease is also another category of stress inducers. Diseases induce stress. So the first thing to do in terms of control measures to stress is to identify the medical condition or whatever is the source of the stress. Next slide. And then you need to alter the environment where the environment is the source of stress. You need to modify the environment in a way that will be conducive and comfortable for the dog. And then you need to reduce owner stress. There is what we call emotional contagion. It has been established through research that if a dog owner is stressed, it has a way of inducing stress in the dog also. So it is known as emotional contagion. So in ensuring that the animal is free of stress, or to some extent, you mitigate the effect of stress, you also need to reduce stress in the owner if he is the source of stress. And then you need to also ensure that the dog's essential needs are all met by pet feed and all that. And then habituation, which I talked about earlier, and sensitization. Sensitization here actually will lead to chronic stress. And then we have manage separation anxiety, which I've also explained earlier, that when the owners of pets, dogs to be specific, travels, it is established that the dog will go under stress because of the absence of the owner. So we will have to also manage separation anxiety, which is also a source of stress. Yes, next slide. So now this is the last slide. There are other managemental steps that can be taken to mitigate the impact of stress, or that will serve as a control measures, like antioxidants. It is established, I've done a lot of work on this. I've used resveratrol as an antioxidant in stressed animals, and established that if the animals are administered resveratrol before stress, it will significantly reduce the level of stress that the animal pass through. So we have antioxidants. There are some of the therapeutics that can be used to reduce the level of stress. We have common multivitamins. And in fact, one of my work, I use ascorbic acid before 30 minutes before the animals were transported. And I established or realized that if antioxidants are given at least 30 minutes before they are subjected to, for example, transportation and stress, you realize that it reduces significantly the level of the stress markers that you see in the blood. So meaning that administering antioxidants will have a very effective way of reducing the magnitude of stress. And then time of administration, as I said, I have also done several works looking at whether administering antioxidant before transportation, for example, or before stress, because I've induced stress using drugs and I've also transported. Using antioxidant, whether before the animal is subjected to stress and after the animal is subjected to stress, which one is more effective? We have realized that giving it before the animal is subjected to stress is more effective. But the best option is to combine. You give antioxidant before the animal is subjected to stress, which I said, because of managemental processes in farms, stress is inevitable. So if the animals will be subjected to any form of stress, the first thing is that they should be given antioxidant ahead of time before they are subjected to stress, and they should also be given antioxidant after the episode of stress. And then the next thing is to use antimicrobial agents against secondary bacterial infections. Since we know that stress immunosuppresses, it will only be good if the animal, after passing through stress, they are administered secondary antimicrobials against secondary bacterial infection. Thank you so very much. And we are very sorry for the irregularities in our network over here. For the past 3 days, we've been having network problems. So Dr. Grace, thank you so much. And my viewers, thank you so much. We will see meet at the question and answer session and all the rest. Thank you, and thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tanko. Dr. Uchendu, if you want to add any other thing, you have 5 minutes to add any other thing to what Dr. Tanko has actually given us today.
I thought I had my own presentation.
Yes, but because of time, we have like 5 to 10 minutes. Is it something you can actually like run through in 10 minutes?
All right.
Please let him
Okay,
run
let me
through.
just
It's
let me
better.
just go through it. I'll be
At
fast
least, yes.
with it.
Yeah. All right,
So
all right.
all right. So my presentation is supposed to be basically on the effect of road transportation, the impact of road transportation on the health of puppies, because like my colleague earlier has talked about most of the issues associated with stress, but one of the most the major causes of stress is transportation. And you believe me that um, you believe me that several dogs are being transported from one part of the country to the other, or even to neighboring countries. And please, next slide. And just happened to be one of the major towns where dogs are bred and sent to different parts of the country. If you go to our parks, whether luxurious park or motor parks, on a daily basis, you see the amount of dogs that are being transported to different parts of the country. And these dogs are subjected to road transportation stress, which most of the times are detrimental to their health. Most times, like my colleague earlier mentioned, we've had incidents where dogs were brought to the clinic either dead or moribund as a result of the impact of road transportation on them. For my presentation, I decided to look at puppies, because puppies are the major group of age group of dogs that are being transported the most all over the country. And we decided to look at what is the impact of this road transportation on these puppies. So, and we'll be looking at how we ameliorated this effect on these puppies. Part of the ameliorative effect my colleague talked about, generally worldwide, most of the ameliorative effects, most of the researches or most of the measures that have been put in place are basically trying to control anxiety, where they use anxiolytics, or maybe use antihistamines to control motion sickness. And then in some cases where they use some non-pharmaceutical interventions, maybe the use of a thunder shirt, anxiety reducing jackets, where they wear it on these dogs, or where they use calming pheromones, where they spray this calming pheromone on maybe the favorite toy of the dog before transporting the dog. So these are some of what have been done, and most of their findings, to an extent, do not really ameliorate the impact of road transportation on these puppies or dogs. Probiotics have been used. The thing about probiotic usage is they said only that you get result only after maybe continuous use of probiotics, maybe for over a month, before you might be able to get results. And antioxidant, like my colleague mentioned, is what we will be advocating, or from what some of the studies we've done, those are our best bets, because of the oxidative stress that is also involved in this road, or the oxidative stress that complicates road transportation stress. Next slide. So in this study, what we tried to do is we got puppies aged between 8 to 12 weeks.
Dr. Uchendu, are you still with us? Dr. Uchendu. Okay, I'm sure Dr. Uchendu will be back very, very soon. Okay. Dr. Uchendu was actually talking about the impact of road transportation on the physiological and oxidative stress on dogs. So he was actually giving us more knowledge on that. So before Dr. Uchendu comes back, I would like to throw this question. I'm sure most some veterinarians that are here do transport dogs from one location to another. So anyone here that wants to explain or share their own experience? Have you ever had any experience of transporting a dog from one place to another and then the dog does not survive the journey? And what was your next line of action? What did you do different? This question is thrown to everyone, so if you want to answer, you can unmute your mic and then answer. Oh, please raise up your hand and I will call you to answer the question. If you didn't get the question, okay. Dr. Asemota, you can unmute your mic and share with us your experience. Dr. Asemota, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Grace. I had an experience just about a week ago on this same transport-induced stress in a puppy. It was a puppy that was bought for 380,000 naira in Benin and was to be sent to Lagos. It was actually transported to Lagos. The puppy was, when the driver said he stopped at midway between Benin and Lagos, at Okada or thereabout at Ore, said the puppy was alive. Only for the puppy to get to Yanokpaja, and then they realized it was a dead puppy that was in the crate. The owner didn't take it easy. But I think what I realized from inquiries that I made from the park attendants was that the puppy was transported on along with the things that they locked up in the boots. So if the trunk of the vehicle was not properly locked, and then gaseous fumes from the exhaust was having access in there, it means certainly this puppy would have gotten stressed and maybe even got choked by carbon monoxide. So these are some of the things that transportation would cause as stress to dogs. That aside the fact that the puppy, if it's a puppy, even in adult animals, the fact that it's being taken, there's motion sickness is there already. It's going to become salivation, increased salivation. And if nobody takes notice of the fact that this animal is salivating a lot, possibly has defecated because of anxiety and all of that, it's going to get dehydrated. And if the distance is a very long one, it would severely impact on the health of the animal. and it can cause very acute symptoms that might lead to death of that animal. And so there are a whole lot of things that can cause stress when animals are being transported. That's just a few of that I've mentioned of. At least this one was a recent incident, but the driver insisted the puppy was kept inside. But I took the phone number of one of the persons who transited in that bus, and he confirmed to me that the driver moved it because some people said the puppy was crying and all of that. Maybe that defecated the smell, and so he moved it to the boots. And I guess somehow fumes from the exhaust may have gotten into that vehicle and then caused the puppy to die. So these are just some of the things that transportation can cause to dogs. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asemota. Dr. Mordecai, you also raised your hand. You can unmute your mic and share your experience with us.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Grace. My own experience had to do with a 4-month-old dog that was sent to me from Jos. Unfortunately, I don't know what the guy was thinking, but the crate with which he used in sending the dog was, should I say, abnormally small. You know, you expect to have a bigger crate for a bigger dog, but like they had the uniform size for everybody. And the crate they used in sending the dog was really, really small. And by the time the dog got here for maybe a 3-4 hours journey, he was already, near dead, very weak and all. Luckily, the driver called me and I was kind of expectant. So within 5-10 minutes, as a matter of fact, the dog had to start taking his first aid from the park. As soon as he came around, we rushed him to the clinic where he had to take infusions and all. But I understand that the main reason for that problem was the size of crate. So yeah, if he had used a bigger crate to send the dog, maybe we wouldn't have had that issue. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Mordecai. So our hub expert is back, Dr. Uchendu. Can you hear me? Okay, Dr. Uchendu, please unmute.
Sorry for the break in transmission, but still network issues. So where I stopped, the next slide, I saw down, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So we subjected this, next slide, please. These puppies to road transportation for 6 hours. So these puppies, before they were transported, they were kept for 1 week for acclimatization, and then we fasted them a day before the transportation. That's the night before the transportation, before they were subjected to transportation. So we decided that we divided these puppies into 2 groups. One, the control, where we gave just water. Then the treatment group, which we administered melatonin, which is the antioxidant that we want to use for, or we used for the study. We, at the day at the commencement of the study or the transportation, the day for the commencement, we took the vital parameters from these puppies, because the vital parameters are very important because they help you to evaluate the comfort and adaptability of animals to adverse environmental conditions. So we took the vital parameters before, and then 30 minutes into the journey, then hourly till the end of the journey. We also collected blood samples before the journey from the puppies, And then at the end of the journey, we also collected blood samples from these puppies for some of our assays. Next slide, please. So the journey was from our veterinary teaching hospital to somewhere in Lantan North in Plateau State. So it's covered a distance of 369 kilometers, and the speed of the bus where these puppies were loaded, because we loaded them, we tried to mimic what is obtainable in our environment, what people do when transporting puppies to different parts of the country. So we kept each puppy in a plastic cage, and we loaded them into a Hummer bus, and then we set out for the journey. So like I said, during the course of the journey, we took all these parameters, these vital parameters. We also monitored some of the behavioral responses exhibited by these puppies. We were looking out for panting, vomiting, restlessness, and all that. We also measured all that. Then for the markers that we looked at, we looked at some markers, though we have several markers of stress, like the cortisol that was mentioned earlier. You could assay for cortisol, you could assay for acute phase proteins. You could also assay for glucose. Glucose is a physiological indicator for stress. You could do your neutrophil lymphocyte ratio and what have you. They can also be used to assay for stress. In addition, we also assayed for markers of oxidative stress in these dogs. So we also had to take the meteorological data on the in the vehicle as the journey started, and all through the journey we took meteorological data using our wet and dry bulb thermometers. So like the oxidative, like I said, we took blood and we looked at the white blood cell counts, the neutrophil lymphocyte ratio, and we also measured glucose. Then the other part of the blood sample, which we harvested serum, we used them to assay for antioxidant enzymes, and also to measure malondihyde concentration using the method of Draper and Hadley as modified by Yavuz. We subjected the data we got to statistics. Next slide. Then our results. The figure in front is showing us the thermal environmental conditions these animals were subjected to. And if you see from the results, where we had the dry relative humidity, dry bulb temperature, and the discomfort index, we decided to calculate the discomfort index because it will be able to show us how much discomfort these puppies were subjected to. And if you, from the results, you could see that during the course of the journey, these relative humidity, discomfort index, and dry bulb temperature continued to rise. And it peaked at 4 hours into the journey before it declined a little and went back again towards the end of the journey. So from these meteorological data, you could see that these animals were subjected to so much stress as a result of the transportation, and given the environmental condition where they were transported, because this study was done during the hot, dry season. Next slide. This shows us the effect on respiratory rate. Next slide. The pulse, next slide, please. The pulse rate.
Can you go to slide 13? Slide 13.
Next slide, please. Shows us the pulse rate, then the next respiratory rate, pulse rate, and the rectal temperature. They all increased during the journey and immediately after the journey when compared to that of the control. And this corroborates other findings by several other researchers like Professor like Ayo and Minka, who did that in birds, and also Minka and Ayo, who did this same, who transported sheep and goats. They also had this increase in these vital parameters. And this indicates that these animals were subjected to stress, transportation stress, and also environmental stress. Next slide, please.
Sorry,
Next.
Next,
I'm trying to round up. Next
Thank
slide. Next. Next slide. Yeah, so this shows us, this table shows us some of the biomarkers we looked at, the glucose concentration and neutrophil lymphocyte ratio. You could see that immediately after the transportation, we had a decrease in glucose concentration. This shows that this may be as a result of the fact that the animals were starved before the journey, and they must have depleted the energy reserve as a result of the stress from the transportation. But if you see at the treatment group where we ameliorated with melatonin, you could see that the glucose concentration was far better than what we saw. It was almost close to what we had before the onset of the journey, indicating the ability of melatonin to mop up the reactive oxygen species that were generated as a result of the transportation. And the lymphocyte neutrophil ratio also shows an increase, which is also indicative of stress immediately after the transportation. It was reduced by administration of melatonin. This shows the immunomodulatory effect of melatonin. Next slide, please. Then this slide shows us the effect of oxidative biomarkers. You could, from the table here, you see that there was an increase in melaldehyde concentration, which is an index of lipid peroxidation, immediately after transportation, when compared to before transportation. We also noticed that there were depletions in the antioxidant enzyme activities, like that of the superoxide dismutase, glutathione, and also catalase. And this was restored by amelioration with melatonin. This depletion may be as a result of the stress, where free radicals were generated, and the reserve was depleted to overcome the excess of free radicals that were generated. Several studies also corroborate these findings. Even my colleague, the work he did with goats also showed a depletion in antioxidant enzyme and also an increase in lipid peroxidation. Next slide, please. Yeah, this slide shows us the behavioral activities we observed during the transport. You could see that there were a lot of those in the control group had they had episodes of vomiting, panting were more, restlessness, defecation, and urination were more compared to those that we ameliorated using melatonin. This shows the ability of melatonin to mop up the reactive oxygen species that were produced as a result of road transportation. And also, melatonin has been reported to have a calming effect on dogs. And it has also been used to ameliorate anxiety in dogs. Next slide. From our studies showed that these puppies, during this period they were transported, were subjected to moderate to severe stress based on the discomfort index we calculated. Then based on the vital parameters, we showed also that these puppies were subjected to adverse environmental conditions. And this adverse environmental condition, together with the transportation, resulted in depletion in antioxidant enzymes and also increase in lipid peroxidation. From our study, we were able to show that supplementation with melatonin was able to improve the welfare of these transported puppies. Next slide. So our recommendation based from this study is we recommend that veterinarians and dog breeders should be enlightened that transportation of puppies and adults induces stress on them, and this may affect the animal health. We also, from this study, we also showed that melatonin, just like most antioxidants that have been studied, can be used to enhance the welfare of puppies and adults subjected to road transportation under adverse thermal condition, because it's able to ameliorate most of the adverse effects associated with road transportation. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Uchendu. That was very, very enlightening. That without wasting time, it's open discussions, questions and answers. Please, experts, please leave it in the chat box. Right now, I'm going to introduce Dr. the discussion section. So Dr. Kayode, you're welcome.
Yep, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Grace. A good job you have done today. And then I'm happy to be here trying to moderate the sessions for today. We will spend another 15 minutes discussing stress in dogs. There are a few things I want our hub expert back, and if you don't mind, can you bring on board the hub experts so that we can be on the two screen? If you want to also make a comment, I think it would be good for you to raise up your hand if you don't want to drop it in the chat box. But let's do this together. The first question I want to ask our hub experts, while we were doing the advert for this, we talked about mental health. There's this craze around mental health now for human beings. Should we be worried about, in summary, should we be worried about the mental health of our dogs? After that, I want to also come back to the transportations of our dogs. You know, when the initial person made a comment that they lost a puppy worth 380,000, you know, you should not lose puppy in this economy, right? If you have, if a client has paid, and I'm interested in knowing what eventually happened, who paid for it? And we could also make this a point of discussion. Who should pay for a loss in transit of puppies? There's a lot of puppy leaving just every day to various parts of the country. And if a client pays 380,000 for a puppy, and then the way it's transported is being malhandled, who should pay? The client, the vet, or the person who sent the puppy, or the transporter? And by the way, I think finally on my table for discussion, should we organize the transportation of puppies? I want to say is the business of transportation of puppies is worth millions of dollars by the virtue of the number of puppies that is going out of Jos and Lagos every day. Should we have it organized? What should we do? You can leave your comment on the chat box, or you could raise your hand and then I will be asking you to unmute. So Dr. Akini, you want to come up first? Raise up your hand, or you could drop your comment on the chat box. Then we'll
okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, very good. Okay, the network was quite really bad. I was able to get some things, and some I missed out some. But again, the part I missed, I think I can make it a question. One of the hub experts, they've done a very good job, very, very good job. I'm glad to have senior colleagues like this helping out in matters because it's important we do not go just academical in terms of speaking languages that layman will not understand. We should find a way always to know how to deliver it to these people, the stakeholders in question, the breeders, the dog owners, and how best it affects them. Okay, by the time we start telling them about oxidative stress, they may not understand that. But we can tell them the effect of stress. Okay, very quickly, the two questions I have therefore. So are we saying it is not advisable or it is advisable, either ways, to feed the dog before transportation? Because if we'll be looking at it critically, if we feed, there is possibility of motion sickness and nausea and eventual vomit, okay, which would alter the homeostasis, which is a concern. And if we do not feed, it is still stress on its own. So which is actually better? Then number two, the last speaker said something about melatonin. Is it something that is readily available that we can actually buy, then give to these animals before transportation, or it's just or there are other antioxidants that are easily accessible and they will not be of adverse effect to the dogs? This I think this is very important.
All right, thank you so much, Doc. Please, for our hub expert, if you can just be jotting down these questions so that I can take everybody, and then we come back to you. Dr. Zatan, so you also served with us for a month. Happy to have you around. We also know that you're from the Proud University of Jos. Is it question now?
Yes,
or
I am.
You want to ask your lecturer a question? I can understand. Okay.
Good afternoon, sir. It's
Good
actually
afternoon.
not a question, but a comment. I want to really thank my lecturers for the good job they've done, and thank you, Parmalat, for the opportunity to discuss this very important topic. Yeah, so a few weeks ago, I had an experience transporting a dog from Jos to Ibadan, and in an attempt to answer the question that was just asked about feeding or not feeding, of the opinion that we shouldn't feed. I think from the experience I had, the dog was basically on fluid, and it was just glucose water. At least you can try to control urination, especially when you have towels and coal within. The dog actually traveled in the car, was right beside me. So those were some of the ways I was able to control cleaning him, and coal. So I think dogs need tender, loving care when it comes to transportation. So instead of putting them in the boot, they can as well sit. They can have a seat for themselves and maybe have towels, and then they can be on fluid so they can control defecation and co. And I think that way, although the stress was much, about 17 hours journey, but I mean, having him by my side, trying to cuddle him, moving him up and down when we stop and co, really helps to manage the stress. And I think if breeders could consider doing that, and even the drivers, I mean, that means you have someone traveling with the dog, it will really help in minimizing stress for these pets of ours. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Doc, and thank you for the contribution. So as I said initially, I think this dog transportation and this stress around transporting puppies from Jos or Lagos to every part of the country, I think it's something we need to have organized. It's becoming, I'm a business person, I'm beginning to see it as a business opportunity. But let's allow more comments. But I'm interested, the first person who made a comment who lost a dog of 380,000, what happened? Who paid for it? And don't tell me it's the vet. Let's get Dr. Asemota, you are raising your hand. Okay, so let's have you answer that question. Who paid for that?
Yes. Thank you very much, Doc. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, Doc.
Okay, yes. At the end of the day, because I paid for a full seat for that dog. So it was not supposed to have been moved to the boot. So that was already a breach in my agreement with the transport company. And so when it happened that the dog died, and the transport, it was even the transport park manager at Yanapaja that called to inform me that this was what happened, that this is the number they saw on the crates. And so they called back as the sender. And so I went back to the park in Benin, reported the case, and they were like, okay, they will reach to the driver who was to return back to Benin the next day. So when he came, he said when he got to Lagos, the dog was alive when he dropped it. But the reports from the park manager there says it was dead when they checked the crates. This is not the first time we've been transporting dogs. So to cut the long story short, the park the transport company insisted that the driver must pay for that the dog because he had already breached the agreement. A seat was paid for that dog. I was there as very early as 4 o'clock, 4:30, so that we can get a first seat for that dog. So it was given a very comfortable place. By 4:30, 4:50, before 5 o'clock, we were at the park. So it was not a case of the dog was not well cared for from here, but on the driver's side, because he felt maybe due to motions, nausea and all of that, the dog had defecated, maybe vomiting, the smell, and then the complaints from the passengers, which he should have just maybe washed the crates and put the dog back in there and maybe reduce the smell. But instead, he sent the dog to the boot. So that was a breach. And so I stood on that ground. The transport company insisted he will pay for it. So at the end of the owner said he was ready for settlement. So I didn't have to make a whole lot of drama. Since he said he wanted settlement, the manager, the company insisted that the driver should pay 50, and the owner agreed, okay, that you'll be okay if they pay 50% of the loss. After all, it's something that could have happened to any. And so, but then I think I will pay 50%. He would have learned his lesson. This is not the first time he's transporting a dog. I know that driver personally, but now this whole thing happened. He's learned his lesson. Yes. He has been a regular transporter of dogs for us. So he paid half. The owner had to shelve the other half loss. But I think this also brings us back to the issue of transportation in the veterinary industry. I think we should have an organized system where pets can be transported, because I haven't shelled out so much money to buy a dog. The vets or the owner shouldn't begin to get such sorry news that the dog died in transit and all of that. If we can have an organized mode of transportation for puppies, it will really help the industry. Thank you very much, sir.
I think so. Then I think we also need to also consider the crates in which they are being transported, but it's something we need to take into cognizance. So I have a lot of comments. Please, when you come up now, just be very brief so that we can bring up our experts and then get this resolved in no time. I have less than 10 minutes. So Mordecai, I'm going to unmute you. Please go straight to the point, then Collins, then Abdullah's fees. Then I'll go to the comment, then we'll bring up our hub expert. To the point, Dr. Mordecai.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. I am of the opinion that the transport sector should be organized or regulated. Yeah. I mean,
So the question will be how? How do we organize it?
Yes, we have to start talking of both insurance and then possibilities of vets in parks, just like we have the.
We even insure some of those dogs. We don't. Maybe hub expert, you will need to also let us know whether dogs from Jos have been insured for some of these stress-induced deaths. All right, thank you, Dr. Mordecai. So, Dr. Collins, please briefly, straight to the point. What's your comment? What's your question?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for the time. I thank you for opportunity. I just have questions to ask, and probably mine would be a little from the perspective of my experience, and another will be a little from shared experience. So my question is, the presenter talked about starving the dog before traveling. I also know, my question now is, starving the dog before traveling, before transporting the dog. Of course, when we talk about starving the dog, we talk about no food, no water. And then this alone is already another stress we are inducing. Now, by doing this, we are also creating an increase in the level of cortisol. Because, of course, we know once there is starvation, there will be gluconeogenesis. And one of the things that cortisol does is to break down glucose from other sources and increase glucose uptake. Now, the question is, starving this dog of food and water and feeding them as vis-a-vis motion sickness that the dog might later have, or pee and pooing, which one is more preferable to the health of the dog? That is my one question. Then the final question.
Go ahead quickly.
I don't know if
yes,
you have.
Collins.
Yes, the final question is: I have been transporting dogs from Jos to Sokoto. If you look at these two weathers, these weather are very extreme, and at the end of the day, for poultry, for instance, we have organized private cars that specifically carry this poultry in crates. But that of dog, just last week, I saw an advert of a company specifically from Jos giving cost of transporting individual dogs, individual puppy. I would want to ask the hot experts, how true is this new development? Is it true, or is it just part of the things we are just seeing? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Dr. Collins. To our hub expert also, we have a few questions in the chat that you might please want to take note of. Somebody is asking the time. How long can you transport a dog without causing quite a handful of stress? Somebody is also asking, can you administer an anesthetic agent to sedate a dog in the process of transportation? Is that advisable? So Abdullah Fiz, lastly from you, quickly ask your question, then we'll bring up the hub experts.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello? Yeah, sorry. I just bop in at the middle of the conversation. I work with a company. I own a company that moves pets internationally through air. So the thing is that the VCN have to private with OIE has a standard already for pet transports, which is the OIE requirement, which all airlines under IATA, the airline in the associations used to transport, and it covers for both land and what's it called, air. So the thing is that we just need to the VCN just need to regulate this sector very well. It's an upcoming one, and we've been seeing it being done locally by movements of pets from Jos to Lagos and to other parts of the country. And the thing is that it's high time you begin to license people that are meant to want to invest in this sector to transport pets, because it's not a small business whereby you buy a pet worth of 3,000, some up to 1 million, and at the end of the day,
exactly.
the main requirement is not being met. They are all guidelines. I will be happy if we could talk after the program to tell you some guidelines and everything, because mostly I do air transport, and there are organizations that are being involved in all these things, and even the local, and it covers the land transportation too. Thank you very much.
All right, so I think I absolutely agree. If you have a document you want to share with us also, it would be good so that we can attach it to the email and send to people. Hub expert. Okay, so let's just lastly take Dr. Ibokwe. Quickly, 1 second, just make your comments, and we can invite back the hub experts to attend to all these questions. Dr. Ibokwe.
Okay. Just going to go along the line previous last now is the area of regulation. Is unregulated. Even food animals, apart from the pets we talked about, have a committee, and they have clear guidelines provided as a regulatory procedure for transportation of animals all over the country. That's what I think needs to be done, but nobody has been thinking about this, but it looks like our thoughts are going in that direction now. So there should be a veterinary council committee set up with experts that understand animal welfare and put these documents on paper and then start enforcing it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's with the resources that's been traded every day on the pet transportation, public transportation across the country and even across the globe. I think it's something the Veterinary Council, fortunately, I'm also part of the Veterinary Council. So I'm able to take it to the president at the end of this discussion to hear a thought and maybe we'll write a memo on it and share with the veterinary council. So let's get in, Dr. Collins too, I'll be happy to speak with you if you can just do me a message after this meeting. So let's get in our hub experts. So many questions, so little time. How do you help us resolve this one after the other? Go ahead, can we bring up, spotlight our hub experts?
Okay, Dr. Femi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. So anybody can pick up the answers to any of the questions, either Dr. Polycarp or Dr. Uchendu.
Yes, we are actually together, so we will be speaking concurrently.
So if your video can be on, so that we can
Dr.
spotlight you.
Yes, Dr. Femi, I will start with whether mental health of dogs should also be taken into consideration,
Yep.
since it has become a trend in human health.
Exactly.
If you recall in my presentation, I said we cannot completely rule out stress in animals. All we can do, or the best we can do, is to minimize. And then where it is inevitable, we try to intervene by whether administration of therapeutics or eliminating the source of the stress. So we will not.
All right, looks like we lost him a bit. I think the weather in Jos is making MTN to not respond. We had a nationwide. Okay, go ahead. We can hear you now. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. One of the questions I want to talk about is the loss due to transportation stress. Who should pay? I think one of the participants gave elaborate explanation. However, my prof, I said from the beginning that my teachers are also here. Prof. Igokwe just mentioned now that PCN should have a committee in place. And I think part of what the committee should be looking at is who bears the loss if a dog dies or on transit. Who should be held responsible? So I think the committee will be able to come up with what should serve as an answer to that question. And then the issue of duration of transportation that will serve as reasonable. In my presentation also, I mentioned that one of the most common means, source of stress that is inevitable in the animal husbandry is road transportation. So there are instances can be reduced. There are instances that it cannot be reduced, and different animals cope differently to example, puppies may not be able to withstand 10 hours transportation. Adult dogs, local breed of dogs, they can withstand a longer period of transportation. So I think if we are talking about and with minimal stress, then we have to look at the issue of species. We have to look at the dog within the plateau has a lesser stress compared to transporting the animal because of differences in environmental temperature, which is also a source of stress. So I want one way answer to this question, but as much as we can as vet, I will suggest transportation seriously. I did not hear anybody mentioning the cases that the dog was purchased around 1.8 million because it's a pure breed. The other one was 2. So this issue of transportation truly is a very serious problem that needs all attention. All of us, as Dr. Femi said, we are all working towards that. So, and while we will not be able to eliminate transportation completely, we have talked about ways of reducing the magnitude by way of administering antioxidants. one of which I said I have used as common as ascorbic acid, and it reduced significantly the magnitude of stress. So ascorbic acid is very common and is available. Multivitamins are always there. So these are some of the antioxidants that are readily available. But for some, they are more of academic exercise, like the resveratrol that I use. That one is not readily available and is also not very cost effective. And I think my colleague will continue from there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Polycarp.
Yeah, on the question of feeding of dog before transportation, it's advisable to not to feed your dog, let's say the night before. I'm not saying starving the dog completely. The night before the transportation. So I think it's best to deprive the dog of food the night before transportation, because it's not, if you feed the dog the morning of the transportation, then you will be up for so many things along the road, motion sickness and all that. So the animal will throw up, like so many things will. So your best bet is the night before. That should be when it to be fed before the transportation. Then on melatonin being readily available, yes, it's readily available. You can get that on in most pharmacy stores. There are supplements. There are supplement sections. You see melatonin, but if you don't get that, there are quite a number of antioxidants that are available.
All right, so I think I'm not sure if he's done or if we lost him, but quite a handful of feedbacks from them. But I think the discussion around transportation of dogs has a business connotation, and I'm happy this conversation is bringing that up, and we're thinking about it and seeing how best we can organize it. All right, so while we're still waiting for him to come up, we have Dr. Gani. Thank you so much for stepping in quickly to probably organize the session at the middle when we lost conversation with them. I don't know if you have a final word to want to say before we give the announcements, and then we can, of course, call it a day for today. All right, good. I think it's up.
Yeah. Okay. Am I up?
Yes, you're up, sir. Just that your network is breaking, so I don't know where. Okay.
Yeah, on the issue of transportation for dogs. Yeah, the network has been very bad, but are you hearing me now?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Well, okay. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. I said beyond the science of transportation. Yeah, beyond the science of transportation, you just mentioned it now that there's a business angle to it. A lot of loss of patronage of clients have taken place on the field due to misunderstanding between those who ordered for dogs and then how the dogs came delivered to them. A lot of latent viral infections, particularly the parvo, had become an issue that even when those dogs are safe and delivered, I'm sorry I lost a lot of ground. I didn't know whether the hub expert mentioned this aspect of it in his presentation. Most dogs arrive destination safely, but in few days after that, they come down with viral diseases because of the suppression of immunity. And it's not very easy for clients to understand this. I don't know whether I'm still being heard. My network is very bad here.
Loud and clear, sir. Loud and clear, sir.
Yeah, so because of that, personally, I have had to encourage owners and people who want to buy dogs. I just try to introduce horses to them
and allow them to take the risk of transportation and the consequences that follow it. Perhaps that's just what I want to add to what has been submitted. But I particularly like this version of presentation because of the practicality of it today. Thank you, Femi.
Okay, thank you so much. We also acknowledge that you are also a clinical pathology genius with quite a handful of practical experience. Thank you for quickly jumping in and also steering the conversation. So right now, I think we still have a little issue with the hub experts. I'm just going to hand over briefly to Dr. Grace to do the post quiz. We are gradually wrapping up. And then to also let us know that this meeting, you can earn points from the Veterinary Council by simply making a payment for your certificates. The sessions are free. While Dr. Grace will be rounding up, I'm going to be sharing details of how to go about requesting for your certificate. So Dr. Grace, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Kayode. That was an interesting section. Oh, we'll be going into our post quiz. A very, very wonderful quiz. If you took the pre-quiz, it's not different, same question. We just want to know if you understood what was discussed in this session. So our post quiz will be up in a minute. Okay, it's up. Our post quiz is up. So based on your understanding of today's topic, please engage in the post quiz. And the post quiz is for 5 minutes. So don't be scared. It's the same thing. It's very simple questions, 5 questions, very simple. I trust veterinarians. You guys can do it. Oh, all right. People have started answering. So please engage in the post quiz. It only take 5 minutes before we round up this session of our please engage in the post quiz. So after the quiz, we'll call back our hub experts. Whether you passed or failed, because our hub experts will be back to answer the questions from our post quiz. So you just check, oh, did I pass or did I get it right? Well, I'm very will pass. I'm very sure. I have strong faith in all the participants that are available. I have 2 minutes more for our post quiz. Please engage in the post quiz. Sorry, 30 seconds more to round up. Fifteen seconds more. Okay, I'm going to give latecomers 30 more seconds, just 30 more seconds. I'm sure you can give you guys just 30 more seconds. Oh, it's 15 more seconds now. Okay, we've come to the end of our post quiz. So I'll be inviting our top experts to answer the question so you can actually check if what is selected is correct. Dr. Uchendu or Dr. Tanko, are you still with us? And Dr. Tanko
We're
are
not
not around.
around, but I'm happy to issue you the answers just so that when you read the questions, I can just announce the answers. Go ahead.
Okay, no problem. So, question 1. Which of the following is a true reflection of eustress? We have stress that induces neither negative beneficial response. We have stress that induces beneficial response. We have stress that induces negative or detrimental response. And then we have stress that induces both detrimental and beneficial response.
All right, happy to answer the question, Dr. Grace, but as always, a few of our participants got it wrongly. But I think we're happy at the end of the day, majority got the answer. So the option is B, stress that induce beneficial response, and 40% of participants got that correctly.
Okay, so if you actually pick stress that induces beneficial response, then you are correct. Now, second question goes like this. Which of the following is a sign of motion sickness that can be experienced by a dog? The options are fever, estrus, nausea, and syncope. Sorry.
Okay. All right, Dr. Grace, I think we have the highest figure for this one. So the option is C, nausea, and 93% of our participants got that correctly. I think they deserve a round of applause.
Yeah, you guys deserve a round of applause if you got question number 2, which is nausea. Now, on to question number 3. Which of the following is a main stress hormone? We have prolactin, cortisol, insulin, and progesterone.
All right, again, the majority of our participants got this, 98%. The answer is cortisol, and we have vets on top of this.
Wow, this is amazing. I trust our veterinarians. Number 4 is, which of these parameters is an indicator of thermal balance and severity of adverse effects of thermal environmental condition on animal? Options are respiratory rate, rectal temperature, heart rate, and then pulse rate.
Dr. Grace, fortunately for us, or unfortunately for us, the highest percentage, which is respiratory rate, got it wrongly. But the correct answer is rectal temperature, and 44% of our participants got that.
Oh, that's actually impressive. And finally, uses decrease in blood glucose level, true or false?
Okay, so this is more like a jam question, and our home expert said the answer is false. So I think majority of our participants today will have to take this class again to decide why they all went for true. But that's it from the home expert. The answer is false.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for helping us today. We'll be moving on to announcements. Thank you very much if you are still with us in this clinical conference series. We really appreciate your presence. Thank you very much for being with us up to this moment. We apologize for the network issues, and then we move into announcements. Okay. First announcement: Farmalats, we now serve as a private CE providers, that's continuous education providers to the Veterinary Council of Nigeria. Our tech class sessions are free, but a token of 3,750 naira is needed to have your VCN accredited certificate and names submitted for your continuous education points. Steps to take. We have our account number displayed on the screen, Providence Bank, using your VCN number in the description. Send a message to Dr. Nancy Eni Otu on the number is displayed on the screen for verification and your certificate. Follow us on our social media platform. We are on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Just simply search Farm Alerts and then you see us. So please follow us on our social media platform. And this meeting was recorded and it will be released on our YouTube, on most of our social media platforms. Thanks for coming and thanks for joining us on this session of our clinical conference series. Thank you to our hub experts. Thank you, Dr. Gani, and thank you to all our participants for contributing to this wonderful session today. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you in our next clinical conference series, and the information will be sent to various platforms and on social media. Thank you very much. This session is officially closed. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, Grace. Hello, Grace.
Yes?
Yes, the account number again. Can you put it on the chat, or maybe, I don't know what to our mails. I didn't quite get the account number.
Okay.
Can they put it on the chat for us to copy paste?
Yes, it's on the chat box right now.
I'm seeing it right now. Okay, so
yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. You can check the account number on the chat box, and then you can note it down and copy it somewhere. And I thank you, our hub expert, Dr. Polycarp Tanko and Dr. Chidebere Uchendu. Thank you very much for taking your time to come and brief us on this common condition. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I want to especially thank